Namaste dear friends, and we are in the final lecture of our course on advanced level of spoken Sanskrit, and I'm going to give you a course summary so that it becomes easy for you to get the essence of what we have studied thus far. Tari namaste priya mitrani, vayam asmakam pathasya antime varge smah idanim yatra aham asmabhir yat sarvam api pathitam tasya ekak sankshipta rupena punah smaranam karayishyami. So the course summary, this particular lesson comprises mostly of the grammar aspect of our study, and lecture 27 is going to focus on that particular part. The concepts covered are a course summary, of course, as we've mentioned, application in a conversation, and understanding the multi-layered benefits of studying Sanskrit, especially for the individual. And then we'll close with certain verses and quotes on the importance and benefits of studying Sanskrit. So, Vakya Prakaranam. So, we are looking at how the sentence is formed and all about it. Taryatra, you are very, very familiar with this, and mainly the two parts of, the whole Subanta part of it, and here you have the dhatus, you have the verbs part of it, when you want to try and form a sentence. All these are the different aspects which we will delve in greater detail, and here with an application in a sentence, Balakaha Gachati, we break it up right from the letters all the way up to see how this single sentence can be deconstructed and deeply understood. And this is the Varna Prakarana. So let's look at how the letters were understood more. So this is the Varnamala, a deeper understanding of the Varnamala, and we see that there is the Varnamala Aksharani Varnas, where it is pronounced from, the number of letters that it has, matras. So we see that every single letter has so many aspects to it when we try and pronounce it. And this is a little more elaborated form of showing the different kinds of prayatnas, the places, the ucharana prakaraha, abhyantara prayatna, the bahya prayatna, then the places in the mouth and the corresponding letters that we have beside it. Sthanani, so kasya aksharasya kim sthanam, the places of the letters have been clearly given to you here. Moving on, further details on the kind of effort, the prayatna that we have to do, bahya prayatna or abhyantara prayatna is mentioned here in great detail. So go on to the Maheshwara Sutrani, and with the Maheshwara Sutrani we see that we have these common pratyaharas which are ach, implying the vowels, hal, the consonants, hash, the mridu vyanjanas, and khar, the karkasha vyanjanani. And since this is the last class, I invite you to join me once more to recite the Maheshwara Sutrani. So a, I, un, ril, rik, e, ong, I, ouch, ha, ya, va, rat, lan, nyam, mangana, nam, jhabhai, ghadha, dhash, jabba, gadda, dash, kappa chatatta chatattav kapai shashasar hal. Astu? I hope you've been able to memorize that. This one is really worth memorizing because it does many things to the system as well. Tari Shabda Prakaranam kimasi Subanta Prakaranam, formation of the Subantaha. So this is another thing that we've been familiar with, where we see that the sentence has mainly three kinds of words. You've got the Subantaha, the Avyayas and the Tingantaha, and this entire section will deal with the Tingantas that we'll look at further ahead. And then the Subantas basically are formed by the Pratipadikam. That's the important word to remember, that there is a Pratipadikam or the root form, which then gets the suffixes and you get all the gender, etc. And on top, the different kinds of Pratipadikas that are formed, especially the notion of the Vritti that we've been looking at lately. So here we'll look at the Vrittis a little more again. So the words themselves are of four kinds. You've got the Visheshyam, that's the noun, the adjective, the pronoun and the number. You've got the mixed root and you've got the pure root. And the Vrittis are the five ways in which the nouns are formed, which are Kridanta, Sanadyanta, Dhatu, Tadhita, Vritti, Ekashesha Vritti and Samasa Vritti. So what are the Vritti? We are very familiar with this, but maybe last time we'll just read the definition. Dvabhyam padabhyam bahubhirva padahi bodhaniya arthaha Sanskrita bhashayam kadachit ekeneva padena bodhayitum shakyate. By one word you understand many words. And then you have the pratyaha shabdan anuyojitaha artham parivartayanti अथवा अर्थस्य विशेषतां प्रकटयन्ति. So it either enhances the meaning or it changes the meaning completely. So these are the suffixes that we've seen. So we've got 5 kinds of vrittis that we've looked at: the krit vritti, tadhita vritti, sanadyanta dhatu vritti, ekashesha vritti and samasa vritti. Krit vritti that have the krit pratyayas, these are the formation of words from roots with primary affixes. So krit pratyayaha dhatubhyo vidhiyante prayana nama shabdaha sarve dhatushuhu krit pratyayanam yojena nishpannaha. So most of the words or several of the noun words that we have come from the connection of the root verbs with certain suffixes. Astu? So moving on, this was a list of words that we had looked at. So mainly the lyut, which becomes anar. So just remind you once how to understand this chart. So you've got the krit vritti, lyut. So whichever root verb plus the different suffixes, lyut, of lyut there's only anar that remains, which ends up becoming atana. So bhojana, lekhana, all of them have the suffix lyut attached to them. So at plus lyut gives us atana, plus the sup, which will give us the vibhakti, etc. from there. So that's how we understand this particular chart. Moving on, the bhu dhatu, with the help of Dr. Rakesh Das, we got this particular chart which tells you that what are the different suffixes that the bhu dhatu attaches itself to. Astu, so you can pause with each one of this and revise it as you go ahead. Atra tadhita vritti kimasi tadhita pratyayaha tatra, formation of derivative basis from nouns by secondary affixes. Tari kim asti atra yatha krit pratyayaha dhatubhyo vidhiyante tatha tadhita pratyayaha namabhyo sanjña sarvanama visheshanadibhyo vidhiyante. Okay, so that's where the tadhita suffixes get attached. So here we have a few of them. Again, a reminder that these are not exhaustive, but they are an attempt to be sufficiently comprehensive so that you know what is there. But there are many more suffixes that we've not been able to incorporate in this level, but we're hoping to whet your appetite so that you can look at them by yourselves. So for example, you've got even a word like sundara becomes saundaryam. There is a pratyaya called shai pratyaya that does it, that we've not been able to include in this lesson or the study. So you see, in remains in and becomes the guni plus in is gunin. Astu? And then similarly you have the different words that are added. So these are the root suffixes and these are the transformed suffixes to give us the meaning. And then we see that in the tadhita itself we've got the stri pratyaya, and what the stri pratyaya does basically is that it renders a masculine word into a feminine by suffixes like tap. So vrid becomes vriddha, or vriddha becomes plus tap gets vriddha. Similarly nyip, so e, so sannyasin plus nyip becomes sannyasini, etc. Moving on, we've got the sanadyanta dhatu vrittihi, the sanadyanta dhatu pratyaya. These are the desideratives, the multiplications of the root form. So we see that there are sanadyanta dhatu pratyaya, sanadi. So there are a few ones that are mentioned here. So we've got san, which doubles the verb root. So it becomes pat plus san becomes pipateshati, means desires to read. And then you've got pat plus san becomes pipatesha when it's a sup or a noun. And similarly it becomes pipateshu to indicate the one who wants to read. Okay. And then you've got the niche that we are all familiar with, to do causative, to make somebody else do. Young is bhu young, bo bhuyate, young look. So when the look young goes away, it becomes the spardh plus tip becomes paspardhiti. And then the nama dhatu pratyayas. So we've got 5 of them. The idea is like kamyach or kyach, where they get different forms, but the next one, so kyach can either be in the sense of ichhayam or in the behavior, and they get the similar form, putriyati, putriyati. Okay. And then we see you've got achara has another one, hansati, hansayati, and lohitaha becomes lohitayati and kanduyati, etc. So just a quick recap on that. Ekashesha vritti, the 4th of the vrittis, tatra ekashesha pratyayaha santi, ekasheshaha na samasa kintu samasa vat anya eka vritti. So you've got mata cha pita cha becomes pitarau, whereas in the dvandva samasa it will remain mata cha pita cha mata pitarau. So that's a little bit of a difference there. Moving on to the samasa itself, we've got samasannam samasaha, anekasya padasya ekapadi bhavanam samasa ityarthaha, yatha sitayaha patihi sita patihi. and just two kinds largely, Kevala Samasa and Vishesha Samasa. So Kevala Samasa, as you've seen, are those samasas that are assigned as such, like Bhutapurvaha. Vishesha Samasa, we've got four major ones. We've got Tatpurusha Bahuvri Dvandvaha and Avyayi Bhavaha. Tatra Tatpurushasya Chaturdha Bhedaha Santi Bahuvrihihi Tasyaha Samanyaha Visheshaha Chasti Punah Dvandvasya Tatra Iteretaraha Samaharaha Avyayi Bhavasya Tatra Trayastrimshat. So 33 varieties are there, but the most famous are about 12 of them. So a very quick recap on the fact that the meaning matters, and because it's a compound word of generally two words and sometimes more, but two words, so there sometimes the first word, the Purva Pada, is important, sometimes the Uttara Pada, the second word, is important, and sometimes both of them are pointing to a third thing, and sometimes both words are important. So it depends which one, and that importance is also indicated by Pradhanyam. And the classification, as you can see here, of the samasas are done on the basis of which word is emphasized in that particular category. So Tat Purusha, the second word is emphasized, the Bahuvri, the other word, the third word is emphasized, Dvandvaha, both words are important, Rama Krishna Agachataha. So both Rama is coming and Krishna is also coming there. So both are emphasized, and Avyayi Bhavaha Purva Padartha Pradhanaha. This was one attempt at bringing in a little bit of a comprehensive map on the different kinds of samasas. Astu. Anantaram linga parichayopayaha. So we want to understand that how do you determine the lingas of words. Narendra Arya Pustakam Functional Sanskrit, its communicative aspect, and it's available now from Sabda and the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry. So please get a copy of it. It's basically Dr. Narendra Arya's thesis, but it's a brilliant work to give a lot of practice. Bahu abhyasasya avasarah bhavati. Etat yadi purnam pathati Sanskrita bhashayaha bahu pragatir bhavishyati. So your language will increase significantly if you go through this book. So there he classifies them in these particular pratyayas that we've looked at with the vrittis. And Tatra, he has a few more pages where he talks about the different cases in which the vrittis will come in. So for Strilinga, these are some ways in which you can identify them. So especially one that is very easy is the Kti. All the Ktin antas, no? Shakti, Bhakti will come into this category. And then you also have on the other side the Pullinga words, and here it's a little more complex because they've got few letters. If the words end with those letters, then it would tend to be a masculine word. And Atrapi Kaksha Gaha, so they've turned it into a poem that makes it easier to remember. And also would like to mention that the ones that are not included here and are not included in either of them would tend to become the Napunsakalinga words. Trilingeshu Shabdantaha. It should be Shabdantaha and not Shabdantaha. So we've seen that the ending of the words play a very important role in determining the form of that word when it is derived in the Vibhaktis and the Karaka. Astu, tari shabdasya antaha bahu mukhyasi, shabdasya lingaha mukhyasi, shabdanam nirupanartham. Tari atra you see there are all, so you've got different kinds of vowel endings for masculine words, and you've got then the different consonant endings also for the masculine words. And then in the feminine one, I have tried to indicate to you the similarities that are there with some of the masculine words here. Astu. Napunsakalingasya tatra pashyantu bahu samyam asti with the other two genders. So learning the Vibhakti primarily is really about recognizing patterns. If you can identify the patterns, tari sulabham bhavati tesham smaranartham. Smaranartham vyavaharartham tesham upayogartham sahajam bhavati. Astu. So it becomes easier to use them if you can see the patterns. So this was one attempt by Dr. Narendra again in his in another book of his, Sopanaha. It says that the boy, Balaka Yuvati, and there is a way he maps it onto the words here. So he's tried to identify some patterns and put it up here. Okay, and beside that he's got the sentences you can make. So Balakam Pricha Mahilam Vada, for example. So that is how you would apply this particular chart. And then a little more practice, but here it is a practice with the Sarvanamas or the pronouns. The Makara is missing in the Sarvanama Rupani. Tari Pashatu Vayam Kim Janimaha Yuyam Janitha. So you have to play with these. Asman Saha Asman Prichati, Saha Yushman Prichati. So he's given you the first person words there and the second person words informal, and he's also given the sentences to be made, or rather the vocabulary to be used in a sentence formation. अतः पॉज कृत्वा पुनरपि अभ्यासस्य उत्तमः अवसरः भवति अत्र. So dhatu prakaranam, tinganta prakaranam. Tatra we see that all verbs have the root forms, the dhatu, and then they have the pratyaya, the suffixes that give it all its different forms. But the important thing of the dhatu was, of course, that it has a phala. All verbs have to have a fruit, all verbs have to have a process, which is the vyapara. And understanding that is quite insightful even from a psychological perspective. So the phala generally can be of three kinds, either transitive, intransitive. So sakarmaka and akarmaka and dvikarmaka. Sometimes a verb might have two subjects and that has to be incorporated. And then you can of course translate it, either the action is done towards you, then it's atmanepadam, then towards another if the action is directed, it's a parasmaipadi, and then ubhayapadi, sometimes it takes both on. And we've looked at the dasha lakaras here, and there are some that are the sarvadhatukas and the others that are the ardhadhatukas. The sarvadhatuka and ardhadhatuka have to do really with the modality of conjugating them. Okay? And then there's another thing that is important when thinking of conjugating, which is included in the name of the verb itself, is the set, wait and anit. So there are certain additions that come in order to form words in certain tenses, etc. We also have the aspect of the verbs which has to do with the vachyam or the voice. So you will have the kartru vachyam, the karma vachyam, the active voice, the passive voice, and the bhava, the medio-passive voice that is mentioned, the bhava vachyam. So it's just some quick facts about the Sanskrit verb or dhatu. There are about 2000 plus 2200 verbs that have been enumerated, but kevalam tatra ashtashata, 800 are about use. And a very typical formation of the verb is when there's a root, there's a suffix, which is the vikarana pratyaya, and there is the ending ting antaha, which is the conjugative form of the verb. And then there are 10 classifications of verbs into 10 groups, dasha ganaha. Verbs can have several meanings, nanarthakaha, dhatavaha, and the ganas can change accordingly. Astu? And verbs can be conjugated either in the parasmepadi, atmanepadi, or in both the ubhayapadi, and can either be the set or the anit. That was the technical terms. So there are about 10 tenses and moods, and verbs can also be either transitive, sakarmaka, dvikarmaka, two kinds of objects, and akarmaka, lack of any object in it. Dasha ganaha ke santi. So will you join me in doing this particular verse? Bhvadyadadi juhotyadir divadih swadirevacha tudadishcha rudhadishcha tanakryadi churadayaha. So ete ganaha santi, split it up and put it there, and these are the suffixes that they get that then change the form of the verb. So have a look at these. It's not always easy to remember which kind of conjugation a verb will have. So what I have done is that normally we talk about the groups as bhwadi, bhu plus shap vikarana pratyaya, which makes it into bhavati. Astu? So what I thought I could propose is that instead of just remembering bhwadi, you remember it as bhavatyadi. So you already are into the conjugation of the first verb, and if you have that, it's easy to know the rest of the patterns. Dasha lakaraha ke santi. Atra. And in these lakaras, 6 of them are tenses, the blues are all tenses, 4 are prakara bodhakaha or moods, then you've got 4 that are the sarvadhatukaha and they're conjugated in a particular manner, and ardhadhatuka are the non-conjugational verbs. So this is a song that Dr. Narendra had created where he says, Adyashvah aryahya vidhi purvakam ami ani am yam e I eya ava 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 eva he hai hi hi yuyam tattadvedvam tvam sis sesvathas ami ani amya I na 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 na, and I'll let you do that. Okay, so we've already done this song before, and you can also find it on the net, Dr. Narendra. Those of you who would like to have copies of it, please get in touch with us and we'll try and make sure that you can find the copies of his songs. And then a similar application of what we looked at earlier on. This is also from Dr. Narendra's book, where he says that it is Vande, Vandishye, Vandaih. So using, you see, it's Adyashvaha Aryahyaha Vidhi Purvakam. Adyashvaha Aryahyaha Vidhi Purvakam. That's how you're supposed to use it. Ami, ani, yam, e, I, e, ya. That's how you would place it onto the square. Astu? So moving on, we have this chart which is the typical grid and lines chart that is there. So you've got tip tas jhi, sip thas tha, mip was mas, and then ta atam jha, tha satam dhwam, it, vahing, mahing. And this is the, just like the su au jas, out shas kind of suffixes that are added there. Huh? So these are the other ones that are given for the verb conjugations. So upasarga prakaranam. So we've got these 20 upasargas that we've looked at, elaborated further in this particular table. These are some of the tentative meanings. Itopi yadi shabda kalpadrume pashyanti ya vachaspatye pashyanti, you'll find many more words there. And just we see how the change in the upasargas brings a significant change in the meaning of the words, of the verbs rather. So avyaya prakaranam, and these are some of the avyayas that we have seen very recently. So we've known that avyayi bhava samasa gets avyayas, and then visheshanam. So when adjectives turn into adverbs, they again become into avyaya or indeclinables, and you get an idea here of all of it that we've seen. So here you see there are tadhita and kridanta, but there are few of them, not all. Karaka prakaranam. So what was a karakam? Basically a karakam is that which is attached to a verb, and here you've got these different endings that will tell you which is the kind of vibhakti also that you are wanting to use. In the vibhakti and the karakam, they are not identically mapped one on one. So you've got 6 karakas, you've got 7 vibhaktis, and you've got 8 cases, because the cases in English also incorporate the vocative there. And so this is just an attempt to map out the different terminologies that you've been familiar with. So Angla bhashayam vayam janima cases santi anantaram, what they really correspond to from a Sanskritic perspective. And then you've got the general meaning and the prepositions in Hindi for those who would find that easier. Anantaram, an application here where you take the main verb and Karaka asks the question who. So kaha dadati, and the answer is that kaha dadati, atra asti shikshakaha dadati, pradhana shikshakaha dadati. Kasya pradhana shikshaka, it's a secondary level. The 6th vibhakti according to the Karaka is a secondary level, because it doesn't directly have a question with the verb itself. And then similarly you ask all the other questions. So who has done it, what are they doing, how are they doing it, why are they doing it, from where are they doing it, and in which place are they doing it. Astu? So we've got the different karakas, karta, karma, karana, sampradana, apadana, adhikarana, and the sambandha, it goes into the vibhakti. So sandhi prakaranam. So now that we've looked at the different word formations, and we've also looked at how they are declining in the sentence. We started with the letters and gradually we are building on so that we can see how the longer sentences are made. So sandhi prakaranam bahu avashyakam asti in order to make sense of the verses. So tatra definition is kaha sandhi varnanam atishayitah sannidhihi sandhihi. When words are so close, there is a phonetic morphing of the nature of those sounds. Okay, so adesha, it's shatruvat, or agamaha, so it's mitravat. In lopaha, there is an absence, and then prakriti bhavaha, where the word retains the original formats. So just different ways in which the words combine. So you've got mahan utsavaha. Both are like harmonious marriage relationships. So this was just a little bit of a humorous way of trying to understand. But I don't think it's so humorous either, because I think that there is a subtle reality in the way that languages shape our worldviews and promote different ways of conceiving even relational dynamics. So we've got these, there are the 3 kinds of sandhis, the swara sandhi, vyanjana sandhi, and the visarga sandhi. So the vowels, the consonants, and the aspirated sounds. So let's look at the swara sandhi first, or the vowels, and we see that these are the general understandings and these are the specific rules that are given by Panini in his Ashtadhyayi in order to tell us how to do the sandhis. Atra revision table with all important swara sandhis. So atra etasya upayogam kritva kartum shaknuvanti sahajataya, and these are some more for you. And then we have the vyanjana sandhi, or the consonants. So what do we have? We've got about 13 varieties there. Again, this is not the only ones, there could be few more. So you see the general name and the different sutras that are added to it, the second half of it. And then there's a revision table of the important combinations of Vyanjana Sandhi. Again, this is by Dr. Narendra Arya. Astu, this needs time. Some exercises for you. Revision of a table with important combinations of Visarga Sandhi. Tari atra Visarga Sandhi, for these 5 types of Visarga Sandhi. Revision of tables with the important combinations. Kim kim asti atra ekavaram drashtum shaknuvanti. Etat sarvapi Narendra Aryasya pustake asti if you want to understand them further. And then you have the concept of Vachyam. So now we've moved towards the sentence, and how do you make your sentences? So either, as you can see here, you can either say it in the active or the passive or the mediopassive. So it means Karmavachyam Parichayaha. So we've got Lakshanam Kartrivachyasya Prathama Kartrikarake Dvitiyantam Bhavet Karma Kartradhinam Kriyapadam. So we know that in the regular Kartrivachyam, the Karta or the doer has the agency or the subject nominative case, and the karma or the object gets the Dvitiya Vibhakti or the accusative case. But Atrate Vadanti Karmavachya Kim Bhavati Karmavachya Prayoge tu Tritiya Kartrikarake Prathamantam Bhavet Karma Karmadhinam Kriyapadam. And then the last one, which is Bhavavachyam, Bhave Kartus Tritiya Syat Karma Bhavascha Sarvada Prathama Purushasyaika Vachanam Syat Kriyapade. And moving on, some examples for you here. So you've got this in the Kartrivachyam, and then you have to convert that into the Karmavachyam. So very typically, the nominative will become the instrumental and the instrumental will become the nominative. And the verb will go with the object that has turned into the subject. So let's move on. Sanskritadhyanasya Sambhashanasya Vyaktigata Labha. What are the personal benefits of studying Sanskrit? Here's something on Sanskrit and wellness. Aham sarvada vadami Sanskritam vadantu Sanskrita vadantu tena asmakam bahu labhaha bhavanti. Tari, this is just a little bit of an understanding, a psycholinguistic understanding of how Sanskrit benefits us really personally. And so physiologically it stimulates all the parts of our being because of the systematic stimulation of the vocal system and the connection with the chakras, the energy vortexes of the body. Secondly, the emotional, the pranayama, it's the only language where every single letter you utter has got a very conscious extent of breath, amount of breath that you're going to put into it, and that's like a regulation of your prana levels, your breathing, which in turn then affects your emotional being as well. And then we've got the mental being, the complexity of the decisions to be made in order to articulate the simple sentences is phenomenal and enhances the power of decision making in the individual. Spiritually, it has the potential to reconnect us to the para levels through the cultivation of Ritachit, because Sanskrit doesn't allow us the luxury of saying, oh, this is how I want to do it or I want to pronounce it. No, there is the right way of pronouncing it. If you pronounce it the right way, then all those multiple benefits will be experienced, and therefore this language has the capacity of cultivating Ritachit, which in the Yoga Sutras is supposed to be one of the highest kinds of mental states you can arrive, where the mind knows what is the right thing to be done. The consciousness, the chit, is full of the knowledge of the right. And there are some excellent experiments that have been conducted by Dr. Fred Travis in Ohio University in the US, where he put certain sensors on the body to measure the skin resistance, etc. And he found that when people read Sanskrit, their galvanic resistance of the skin was much higher, and their alpha coherence in the brain was much more, just as much as when people were meditating and doing transcendental meditation. So he had some amazing findings there, and James Hartzell had come up with the experiment that led to the conclusion of the term Sanskrit effect, where he measured the brain capacities of a few regular chanters, and they found that there was a lot more grey matter development in those who have been chanting the Vedas for a long time. But the caveat in that is that he wasn't sure whether it was because of the power of memorization or whether the language had a direct role to play in that. Tari atra eka sambhashanam Piyushena saha kurma.
Pranamah Arye.
Pranama Piyusha. Tarhi adya vayam sarvasya purnasya pathasya ekam samikshanam kurma. Astu. तर्हि तत्र मया चिन्तितम् एतद् वाक्यम् अधिकृत्य वयं भिन्नभिन्नप्रश्नानाम् उत्तरं करिष्यामः, येन अधीतस्य व्याकरणस्य उपयोगः भवितुम् अर्हति।
अस्तु आर्य।
अस्तु, तर्हि वाक्यं त्वया यद् लिखितम् अस्ति, भोजनप्रियः बालकः पितरौ प्रणम्य मित्रगृहं गत्वा तस्य मात्रा सुपक्वं स्वादिष्टं भोजनं स्वीकृत्य सहोदर्या सह सङ्गीतकार्यक्रमं जिगमिषति, यतः तेन नृत्यगीतवाद्येषु आनन्दः अनुभूयते इति मया मन्यते। अस्तु, तर्हि इदानीम् अत्र कर्ता कः अस्मिन् वाक्ये?
कर्ता बालकः अस्ति।
उत्तमं, बालकः। इदानीं तस्य वयं किञ्चित् पश्यामः। बालकः इत्युक्ते तत्र बकार, बकार कुतः? अस्माकम् ओष्ठ्यस्य प्रयत्नेन तत्र भवति बकार। अस्तु, तत्र पुनः सर्ववर्णानाम् अध्ययनं तत्र सम्भवमस्ति, किन्तु इदानीं वयम् अन्तः न प्रविशामः। बट् बालकः तत्र प्रत्ययं स्मरसि त्वम्?
आम्, तत्र बाल इति प्रथमः शब्दः अस्ति, तदनन्तरं तद्धितप्रत्ययः कन्, कन् प्रत्ययः अस्ति
तत्र। एवमेव
स्वार्थे भवति।
एवमेवम्। अस्तु अस्तु, तस्य प्रातिपदिकमपि लिख तर्हि। तद्धित केवलं त लिख संक्षेपेण, त एण्ड् कण् तावदेव। अनन्तरं कीदृशं प्रातिपदिकं? तद्धितप्रातिपदिकं। कीदृशं प्रातिपदिकम् एतत्? एतत् निर्मितप्रातिपदिकम् अस्ति। इट्स् अ कन्स्ट्रक्टेड् वन्, यु सी, बिकास् बाल एण्ड् देन् प्रत्यय तत्र योजितं भवति। उत्तमम्। इदानीं समासवृत्त्या निर्मितानि पदानि कानि सन्ति? शब्दद्वयं वदतु अत्र।
आम्, प्रथमे तु भोजनप्रियः अस्ति, भोजनं प्रियं यस्य सः।
एवमेवमेवं, बहुव्रीहि समासः भवति तत्र। अस्तु, आम्,
लिखामि किं?
कीदृश बहुव्रीहि अस्ति जानासि किं?
षष्ठ्यार्थे, षष्ठ्यार्थे अपरं स्वाधिकरण बहुव्रीहि भवितुं शक्यते।
अस्तु, नेक्स्ट्, भोजनप्रिय अस्ति, मित्रगृहं सुपक्वं। सुपक्वं किं रूपम् अस्ति? सो
न शोभनं पक्वं, तत्तु किं? शोभनम् इति सु।
सत्यं,
कर्मधारया समासः अस्ति।
एवम्।
आम्,
अण्ड् पक्वं तत्र पक्तं, क्तान्तस्य रूपमस्ति।
पच्
सत्यं, कृदन्तम् अस्ति तत्र।
एतत्तु भिन्नम् अस्ति, पक्व भवेत्, न तु पक्तं।
सत्यं सत्यं, तर्हि तत्रापि अवधारणीयं भवति। यु हैव् टु बी केर्फुल्, इट् डजन्ट् आल्वेस् बिकम् पक्त जस्ट् बिकास् देर्स् अ क्तान्त देर्। सो दिस् वन् बिकम्स् अ पक्वम्। अस्तु, एण्ड् नेक्स्ट् किमस्ति? सङ्गीतकार्यक्रमं। किं भवति तत्र?
सङ्गीतस्य कार्यक्रमं।
वदतु, कः समासः अस्ति? उत्तमं, षष्ठी तत्पुरुषः समासः। उत्तमम्। अग्रे गच्छामः। तत्र तद्धितान्तपदानि कानि सन्ति अस्मिन् वाक्ये?
तद्धितान्त,
आम्, गत्वा इति पदं किमस्ति तत्र? गत्वा,
तत्तु कृदन्त अस्ति।
कृदन्त। उत्तमम् उत्तमम् उत्तमं,
गत्वा,
सुन्दरम् अस्ति।
आम्,
अनन्तरं तत्र भोजनं किमस्ति तत्र पदं?
भुज् ल्यूट्,
कृदन्तम्। कृदन्तम्, उत्तमं। स्वीकृत्य, स्वीकृत्य ल्यप् भवति तत्र,
परन्तु प्रथमे स्वी।
सत्यं,
कृ ल्यप्।
उत्तमं,
स्वीकृत्य।
उत्तमं। सः तत्र किं पदमस्ति?
अव्ययपदमस्ति।
सः तत्र अव्ययम् अस्ति। पुनः तत्र उक्तमस्ति एकशेषवृत्त्या निष्पन्नं पदं किम् अस्ति? एकशेषवृत्तिरपि अस्ति, तत्र किं पदं भवति?
आम्, तत्तु पितरौ अस्ति।
दर्शयत्र, आम्, पितरौ। सत्यं, तर्हि पितरौ इति पदं माता च पिता च पितरौ इति भवति। अस्तु, अनन्तरं तत्र सनन्तं पदं किमस्ति?
आम्, तत्तु
गन्तुम् इच्छति। गन्तुम् इच्छति, जिगमिषति। उत्तमम्। अत्र कति क्रियापदानि सन्ति?
आम्,
पूर्णक्रियापदम् इति उच्यते।
आम्, तत्तु समापिका क्रिया अस्ति।
सत्यं, तर्हि अत्र किम् अस्ति?
प्रथमे तु जिगमिषति,
जिगमिषति,
जिगमिषति समापिका क्रिया अस्ति प्रथमे। द्वितीये वाक्ये अस्ति अनुभूयते।
अनुभूयते सः कस्मिन् अर्थे अस्ति सा क्रिया कस्मिन्
तत्तु
अर्थे
कर्मवाच्य अस्ति
भाववाच्ये भवति
भाववाच्ये कथं भाववाच्ये तत्र तु भूधातु भाववाच्ये एव भवति अकर्मकधातुः अस्ति
सत्यं
तदनन्तरं मया मन्यते मन् एतत्तु अकर्मकधातुः नास्ति तस्मात् कारणात् कर्मवाच्यं
कर्मवत् अहं मन्ये मया मन्यते मया एतत् सर्वं मन्यते all this is thought of by me so we've just tried to do a practice for you to show you a sentence in which we've applied all that we have learned in this particular course and then bhudhatu tatra just gananam vishaye yada vicharayama tingantapadasya gananam vishaye chintayamः चेत् bhudhatu kasmin gane asti भ्वादिगणे कीदृश तत्र विकरणप्रत्ययः अस्ति
तत्र तु शप्
विकरणप्रत्ययः भवति कस्मिन् लकारे अस्ति अत्र
एतत्तु लकार लट्
लकार अस्ति and कर्म भाववाच्ये अस्ति इति कारणात् तत्र आत्मनेपदी भवति आम् उत्तमम् अहं चिन्तयामि सम्यक् अध्ययनम् अभवत् इति अस्तु इतोपि तत्र बहु अवशिष्टम् अस्ति there's a lot more in that sentence so again press the pause button and see to what extent you can deconstruct that sentence further so we've also got these words like iti etc tena so vibhakti karakam किं कारकम् अस्ति तत्र तेन इति पदस्य
तेन तत्तु तृतीया अस्ति विभक्ति अस्ति तृतीया कर्णकारके
कीदृश नामपदस्य अस्ति
कीदृश तत्तु
सर्वनामपदस्य उत्तमम् and किं वचनम् अस्ति तत्र
वचनम् एकवचनम् अस्ति पुरुष प्रथमपुरुषः अस्ति
प्रथमपुरुष एकवचनं तृतीया विभक्ति कः लिङ्गः
तेन तत्र तु पुंलिङ्गः अस्ति यतः बालकः अस्ति न चेत् तु नपुंसकलिङ्गः अपि भवितुं शक्यते
सत्यम् उत्तमम् अस्तु अहं चिन्तयामि पर्याप्तस्वादः दत्तः अस्ति इतः परं छात्राः स्वयमेव तत्र किञ्चित् कर्तुं प्रयत्नं करिष्यन्ति इति अस्तु
आर्ये प्रणामः
धन्यवादः Astu, so I hope you were able to understand that and follow along with it. Now let's move on. So as we've been doing in all our classes, let's say this one together. Kshama satyam damah kshaucham danamindriya sanyamaha ahimsa guru shushrusha tirthanusaranam daya arjavam lobha shunyatvam deva brahmana pujanam anabhyasuya cha tatha dharma samanya uchyate. And we know from our previous class that this is also the anushtup chandah. So atra sanskrit kakshayah kechana labhaah yatah vayam chandasah vishay charcham kritavantah gatavarge, because we discussed about the different meters and especially the anushtup that we've been looking at more often. I was inspired to try and compose something which I'd love to share with you here. So praudha sanskrita kakshayah पाठान्यस्तु पठेन्नरः श्रद्धावांसः लभेन् नित्यम् आनन्दम् आत्मनो व्ययम्. तर्हि सन्धिविच्छेदं कुर्वन्तु. तत्र प्रौढसंस्कृतकक्षायाः एतत्तु एक समस्तपदम् अस्ति. तत्र पाठान् यः तु पठेत् नरः श्रद्धावान् सः लभेत् नित्यम् Anandam Atmanah Avyayam. So one who goes through this course will always get Anandaha Atmanandam Alapsyate. Asmabi Anvayah api kritah asti tari atra yadi Anvayam kartum prayatnam kurvanti tari atra Praudha Sanskrita Kakshayah Pathan Yastu Pathet Naraha Shraddhavan Saha Labhet. Dhatu kim asti mukhya dhatu Labhet. Kaha Labhet? Saha Labhet. Kim Labhet? Anandam Labhet. कीदृश आनन्दः आत्मनः अव्ययम् आनन्दं लभेत्. कीदृशः जनः सः श्रद्धावान् सः. कीदृश श्रद्धावान् अस्ति सः किं च कुर्यात् प्रौढसंस्कृतकक्षायाः पाठान् यः तु नरः पठेत् सः श्रद्धावान् आत्मनः अव्ययम् आनन्दं लभेत् इति अर्थः। अग्रे पश्यामः। धर्मज्ञश्च कृतज्ञश्च यो पुमान् विधिवत् पठेत् बुद्धिमान् शीलवान् स्यात् सः पिबन्तु संस्कृतामृतम्। तर्हि किं भवेत् तस्य? धर्मज्ञः। यदि एतत् संस्कृतं पठति चेत् धर्मज्ञः भवति, कृतज्ञश्च भवति। यः पुमान्, यः नरः, यः जनः विधिवत् पठेत्, अस्तु, बुद्धिमान् शीलवान् स्यात् सः पिबन्तु संस्कृतामृतम्। अस्तु, तर्हि एतत् सन्धिविच्छेदः प्रायः कृतः तत्र। अनन्तरम् इदानीं तस्य अन्वयं कर्तुं प्रयत्नं कुर्मः। मुख्यधातुः किम् अस्ति? सः शीलवान् स्यात्, सः भवेत् इति अर्थः। कथं स्यात्? कदा च स्यात्? संस्कृतामृतं तु पिबन् सः शीलवान् बुद्धिमान् स्यात्। पुनश्च किं भवेत्? धर्मज्ञः कृतज्ञः यः पुमान् विधिवत् पठेत्। किं पठेत्? संस्कृतं विधिवत् पठेत्। सः तु संस्कृतामृतं पिबन् बुद्धिमान् शीलवान् स्यात् इति। अस्तु, स्पष्टमस्ति? अग्रे गच्छामः। अस्तु, तर्हि अत्र there are some nice quotes and some analysis that Narendra Arya has done in his book in the functional Sanskrit. So सः वदति संस्कृतशिक्षायाः केचन लाभाः। संस्कृतं पृथिव्यां प्राचीना पवित्रा समृद्धा वैज्ञानिकी च भाषा मन्यते। स्वामी विवेकानन्दस्य मतेन वैदिकसंस्कृतात् प्राचीनतरा कापि भाषा नास्ति। संस्कृतभाषा भारते भारतात् बहिश्च व्याप्ता इयं कस्यापि प्रादेशिकनाम्ना न आम्नाता भौगोलिकसीमया वा न सीमिता। ओके, that's an E there. तमिळ्, तेलुगु, औत्कली, पञ्जाबी, कौरवी, हिंदी इत्यादि भाषाणां नामकरणं तत् स्थानानुसारं जातं, किन्तु संस्कृतस्य नामकरणम् इत्थं न अभवत्, यतोहि संस्कृतभाषायाः आधारः सार्वभौमः सनातनः न तु प्रादेशिकः। प्रत्येकं प्रादेशिकभाषा स्वस्वक्षेत्रस्य संस्कृतिम् आहवन्ति, अतः तासु प्रादेशिकतायाः कदाचित् संकीर्णतायाश्च अवकाशः सम्भाव्यते। अनया दृष्ट्या संस्कृतस्य वैशिष्ट्यम् असाधारणम्। अधुनापि भारतस्य प्रत्येकप्रदेशे संस्कृतस्य अध्ययनं भवति, विद्वांसः साहित्य सृजन्ति, किन्तु तेषां रचनासु प्रादेशिकतायाः संकीर्णतायाः वा गन्धः न तिष्ठति। संस्कृतशिक्षायाः केचन लाभाः। संस्कृतशिक्षायाः सन्ति केचन विशेषलाभाः ये अन्यस्याः कस्याः अपि भाषायाः शिक्षणेन न प्राप्यन्ते। तद्यथा संस्कृतं कस्यापि प्रदेशविशेषस्य भाषा नास्ति। इयम् एका अखिलभारतीयभाषा, अतः अस्याः अध्ययनेन भारतं प्रति आत्मीयतायाः भावः जागर्ति, न तु कमपि प्रदेशं प्रति। ख, पृथिव्यां भाषाणाम् उत्पत्तिः विकासादिविषयाणाम् अध्ययनाय संस्कृतम् अपरिहार्यम्। संस्कृतभाषायाः शिक्षणेन सर्वासां भारतीयभाषाणां पृथिव्याः बहूनां भाषाणां च अध्ययने सरलता कर्तुं शक्यते। एतत्तु सत्यमेव। संस्कृतम् अधीत्य अन्याः भाषाः पठितुं बहु सहजं भवति। Okay, it's much easier to learn other languages once you have a strong base with Sanskrit. Sanskrit bhasha aikya sadhika. There is a typo here. Aikatmya bhavana. Sanskrit bhashayah sahaja gunaha. So it's a language of unity. It fosters unity spontaneously. And so here, ata eva Shri Mata bhasha samasyayah samadhana vishaye avadat. Unity must be a living fact and not the imposition of an arbitrary rule. When India will be one, she will have spontaneously a language that is understood by all. The Sanskrit ought to be the national language of India. Every child born in India should know Sanskrit, just as every child born in France has to know French. Iti tasyaha matamasit. Astu, tari केचन अत्र रेफरेन्सस् सन्ति। अस्तु तर्हि प्रियमित्राणि, युष्माभिः सह मिलित्वा संस्कृताध्ययनम् अध्यापनं च कृत्वा मम महान् सन्तोषः जातः अस्ति। मम आग्रहश्च अस्ति यत् भवन्तः कृपया अत्र स्वाध्यायं न स्थगयन्तु, न विरमन्तु, किन्तु अग्रे स्वयमेव तत्र पठनं कुर्वन्तु। वयम् अवश्यं पुनरपि मेलिष्यामः, किन्तु तन्मध्ये संस्कृतसम्भाषणस्य अभ्यासम् अवश्यं कुर्वन्तु, तस्य संस्कृतामृतस्य स्वादं च अनुभवन्तु इति मम विनम्रप्रार्थना अस्ति। तेन अहं पुनर्मिलामः इति वदन्ती अत्र विरमामि। नमस्ते।